Hello, everybody, and we are live. Welcome to Angular SF. Miko, who is organizer of this group, isn't here today, but my name's Tracy, so I'll help. I'll help MC it. I help host Angular MTV sometimes as well, so it's so great again to be back in SF, at least virtually, and hanging out. And wanted to, again, give a big shout out to Angular team members, both Ja and Emma, for coming and speaking today. So it's going to be a fun time. There is also a comments section in YouTube, so feel free to drop comments in if you have any, or any questions in if you have any. And Emma is actually going to be first up for the state of Angular. So I'm going to go ahead and add you to the stream, Emma. There you go.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
like Tracy said, my name is Emma Twerski. You can find me online at Twerski. And I was actually just thinking about this, but this is the first talk I'm giving having moved to San Francisco. So I think it's pretty fitting that it is Angular SF. Very excited to be here virtually, although I am actually in Angular SF. So I think that's cool. So yeah, before I get started, I just want to gauge vibes. So if you want to put the emoji that you are thinking of right now in the chat, let's start with that. And then I can review them maybe at a later date. But anyways, so I'm Emma. I work on Angular at Google, and we're here to talk about the state of Angular. And so we've been giving this talk a lot, and things are continuing to change. And let's talk more about it. Ooh, I like the signal, the alarm emoji. I don't know. Anyways. So just to level set, I think something we've been talking a lot about as a team is what are our core values? What are we here to sort of do? And we can think about this in three parts. So Angular strives to make apps that developers love to build, right? When we think about community, we think about the fact that we love for developers to want to use the technologies we're building. And in turn, we want to make sure that all of those apps that people are building, people love to use. So at the end of the day, there's end users, there's developers. We love that there's a lot of love in there. And our third core value is that the community feels welcome. And that's why we're here today. That's what my entire job is. And that's where I love to spend my time, is in the community. We're in open source, and so open source obviously has extra community around it, and we want to make sure that everyone feels welcome, that both those end users and everyone using Angular really feel that love. And so what is that actual community? Well, we get asked this a lot. But if we look at the numbers, we've seen that in the last few years, we've gone from about 1.4 million downloads to 2.6 million weekly NPM downloads. And remember, that's just Angular that's being used in open source. So that's not including private repos, all sorts of larger enterprise customers or companies that aren't on NPM. So like Google, for example, wouldn't be included in that because we have a different download system. So other things like Bitbucket, obviously. And then on GitHub, there are over 1 million projects currently using Angular, again, not including private repositories or things not on GitHub. But I mentioned Google there, and obviously not obviously, but I work there. So what about Angular at Google? So Angular develops with Google. Angular is basically built on Google, and Google is also built on Angular. So there's thousands of people authoring Angular code monthly. There's also all sorts of things that you're familiar with that Google develops that use Angular. So you can think about things like Firebase, Google Domains, if that's how you host maybe your website, ads, Google Cloud, is probably the biggest Angular project in the world. And there's so many other things, right? The entire workflow. So even things that aren't built with Angular are built using Angular. All of the code editing, all of our internal code editor, the way that you open essentially like an internal PR, all of that is Angular. So even if it's an Android application, it's probably built using Angular at some point. And with that, we have about 1,000 new engineers every year that are learning Angular and going through our training courses. So we can see that that's continuing to grow. That is actively increasing. So we're continuing to onboard and teach new people about Angular, and that community is actively growing within Google. Now, if we look at the other side, we are obviously a team at Google that is writing a lot of the Angular code that you're using, but the community is also contributing so much of what Angular is at this point. It's not just Google. There's so many different things in open source. Just in version 12, some of the highlights from community contributions that are major features or major feature drops are avoiding NG zone, throwing warnings, or HTTP clients specific metadata, min and max form validators, app initializer. There's so much that these are all completely community contributions coming from without our team that landed in a major version as a major release. And this is just version 12. So there's so much out there that the community is doing. And so if that's something that interests you, let's talk about ways that we see the community contributing. So obviously, there's submitting pull requests. So all of those things on that previous slide were different things that people chose to submit. But there's also things like opening issues, right? You're developing probably more Angular code than I am, and you might be using it in a different way. So you have the best, like the latest and greatest ideas for what Angular could be, or you run into issues that maybe other people haven't reached. And so a great way to contribute is to open an issue. We'll talk a little bit more about the feature request process, but there are issue templates on all of our GitHub that were recently refreshed. So it really walks you through how to open a good issue. There's also a great blog post by Mishko on the Angular blog of writing a good issue. And then also, like, maybe you don't have a new unique idea. I know I sometimes get really frazzled when I look at the all of the great ideas and issues on GitHub, but I have ideas about things that other people have brought up. Maybe I have a unique input. So commenting on other issues, maybe you just find something that you also ran into, supplying information and letting us know, that kind of thing is equally important. And then the same thing goes for participating in RFCs. So an open RFC is a request for comment, and we are always running new RFCs. We're always looking for community input to say like, hey, we're thinking about this thing, but we don't know how everyone's using it. We can't talk to all 1.8 million of you, but like, let us know what you think about this idea, and we would love your input. And those are GitHub issues that we're always tweeting about. So that is another really great way to provide input. And then finally, we run surveys, right? So like the best way to find about all of this is on Twitter, but we always want input. Basically, the synopsis is we want input, and contributing is input. So some of those open right now are, since the last time we gave this talk, we've opened 2 new RFCs. So we have an RFC open on the idea of proposing persistent build caching by default, which was an opt-in feature in v12.1 on the CLI. And then we're also looking for anyone who is developing with large-scale applications and thinking about micro front ends. And you can just email us for that. And we also have a new RFC that was just published last Thursday on my birthday about JIT compiler feedback. So again, all kinds of new things. These are like actively changing. Again, all since the last time that we gave this talk. I'm just realizing, don't want that. And these are all really great ways that we are looking for input. Oops. But let's say that you want to do a little bit more. So maybe you have one of those really great ideas and you want to open a feature request. We just introduced a new type of a feature request process so that we can be a little bit more streamlined, so that we make sure that all of the great ideas are getting the same amount of attention and that we're able to prioritize and respond more quickly to all of those ideas. And so you start by coming up with your great idea. You have a feature. Let's say you want it, I don't know. Oh, I can't come up with something on the spot, but let's say you have a great feature. You're going to have that feature opened. You're going to walk through the template process on any of our GitHub repos. It maybe has you come up with some sample code, maybe a demo of what you'd like to see. We'll label it as a feature request. And then from that point onwards, if it's in the roadmap, we'll label it as prioritized. We might link it as a duplicate because a lot of the roadmap is already in our issues. And we might close it if it's a duplicate. But otherwise, we'll give it 60 days. And in those 60 days, we'll hope that the community goes and thumbs up it as an issue so that we know that it's something the community is really interested in. And you're trying to reach that threshold of 20 likes or 20 thumbs up on that issue, which is why, again, it's really important if we're thinking about how to contribute that you're going through GitHub issues. And if you see something you're interested in, that you're commenting and giving it a reaction. And as long as it gets more than 20 thumbs up, then we're going to prioritize it. We're going to either label it as prioritized, or we as a team are actively triaging all of our issues, looking at them and making sure that we are responding and we're giving valuable feedback on all of our issues. We're really working on that response time. We've recently really reduced our issues by about, I think, 50%. And that is a huge priority because there's so many good ideas out in the community that we want to be able to respond to. And so if you want to know more about this, there's an entire blog post written by Minko Gechev, our very own, that I would highly recommend. The link is on the screen if that is something that you are interested in. Just pause the YouTube video and copy that over. We have a lot of links. So we've talked about the community. We've talked about all the things the community landed in V12. Let's talk about what is in V12 that we're excited about sharing. And I'll even go a little bit further and talk about some of the minor releases that have happened since, again, the last time that we talked about this. So nullish coalescing. I've never heard the word coalescing more in my life. But the entire idea here is the community is so excited about this, and we're so excited because it's just using the best of TypeScript. It's cleaning up those complex ternary operators. So you have something like this in your template where you're checking if it does multiple things, and then you're giving it different options. And you don't actually have to do that anymore. Now you can use a much simpler syntax. Obviously, again, in this demo, you're like calling a function from a template, which I fully understand, like not best practice. I'm not endorsing this, but I'm just saying like, wow, a lot of code, less code, nullish coalescing, super cool. Also a fun word to learn. I'm super excited. I'm a big CSS Sas person. And so something that's really exciting for me in V12 is Inline Sas, which basically means if we're thinking about like, some of us are really into single file components, which is a power that you should use wisely and carefully. This is not here to write really big, massive components, but let's say you have like 2 lines, you just want to make something neon pink because everything should be neon pink. You can now declare your style is in your template with Sas. So you can use all of the fun like Sas variables, you can use everything there until CSS does its nested operating and variables. I still write Sas, although that new CSS spec is very interesting. And so this is something that version 12 and forward you can migrate to. It's just an option in your build angular.json file. And then you can use Sas, which is super cool. Another cool thing is how many times, me always, do you type ng build and then forget to specify that you're building for prod before pushing to Firebase or whatever you're deploying on, and you end up with the dev build. And, you know, I am a relatively new Angular developer, and so I do it a lot. And for especially new and learning developers, it's a mistake that we don't want people to be accidentally making. So we've chosen to make ng build prod by default. So that basically means that anytime you're building your application, it's going to be built for prod because that's what a majority of people intend to do anyways. So why type the extra like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things on a keyboard, right? Like that's 6 more typos that I could make that I just like don't need to be doing. So ng build is now prod by default. There's some other prod by default options in the CLI. And it's just like it's a fun way to make sure that there's interoperability with other deployment options and things like that. Yes, I see a thank God in the chat. I agree. This is all just, again, intentionally trying to help the community and especially new developers have a better experience. The CLI is great anyways. Sometimes I'm surprised how they find ways to make it even better. You can also migrate existing projects. So again, most of these changes have migration scripts. Most of them, the migration script actually runs in ng update. And something I didn't talk about when I was talking about contributing is testing out RCs. But a lot of those migration scripts get tested in RC versions. So that's another great way to contribute. But again, there's a migration script for making sure that the production by default works for your application as you update. Another thing that got updated is strict mode. So strict mode is now by default. There's a really great blog post explaining all of the benefits here. But essentially the idea is that if you catch issues earlier, so let's say when you're compiling, that you know what those issues are, they're not going to be runtime errors. You're never going to accidentally build for prod, push something up to your application, and then run into an issue at runtime, because strict templating and strict typing is going to catch it a lot earlier. So again, like there's a little bit of overhead here, but the idea is that especially if you're new developers, especially if you're learning TypeScript, if you're learning Angular development, that the earlier you catch those issues, the better. I would rather be frustrated at the beginning than think that something works and not have it work. So that's another thing that we've moved to in V12. By default, again, a really great blog post on our blog. All of these Google links. So this one's Angular-enabling-best-practices. And again, it really is just enabling best practices at an earlier stage in the development cycle. There's a bunch of other wins. So Webpack 5 is prod ready, right? That is super important for for all sorts of things. TypeScript 4.2, again, is really important for RxJS 7. The Ivy-based language service is by default. So that means that the language service you're using in VS Code and your code editors is based on Ivy. And you can learn all about it in this blog post, which is goo.gol/ivy-language-service. And really the idea here is that all of that type checking is going to happen on Ivy. And so that's a great transition to the idea of Ivy everywhere. Again, the Ivy-based language service is this idea of there's major productivity boost if all of our templates are going to be have all of these new features that Ivy enables. So as we move to Ivy, all of these great new things were enabled. In the language service, that means smart navigation. It means template syntax highlighting. It means type information. It means all of these different things that weren't able to happen before. And it's because of the move to Ivy that we enabled a much better language service that you're getting out of your code editor. And again, all of that happens because of this idea of Ivy everywhere. So under the hood, legacy versions of Angular used a rendering and compilation pipeline called View Engine. And really none of this super matters as long as you're a developer and you're just ng updating. But the idea is that as Angular continued to grow and develop, we realized that the true vision of what we want Angular to be and what we want to help teams develop with Angular in that buildable, scalable, robust application sense needed some changes. And so because of that, we have enabled Ivy for all projects back to version 9. But moving forward, we want to be all a part of one community. We don't want that split of Ivy or View Engine. And so we've decided to make Ivy the default moving forward. And we want to migrate to Ivy to enable things like, again, all of those great things that we got with the language service, but in other things. So if you look at the roadmap, a lot of what we're going to talk about from here on out is this idea of what Ivy is enabling as we choose to migrate over to a fully Ivy environment or ecosystem. So we've dedicated all of these times and a lot of time and resource to making NGCC performant and unobtrusive. But we also want to make sure that libraries that are still using View Engine are going to migrate over as well. So there's a great blog post on that as well. So if you're a library author, we highly encourage looking at migrating over to Ivy as well. Again, just part of this idea of the ecosystem all being at one point. Yes. Livey, yes. That was a typo, but makes sense to me. So if we're talking about this idea of wanting Ivy to be everywhere, really the point of all of this is bringing the ecosystem together because we want to do things with this new, like the point of moving to Ivy is that it enables new things. So let's talk about what it enables. So in 2021, we have released Angular Devtools, which is all running on Ivy, especially version 12 has a lot of new debugging APIs that allow us to look into your application in dev mode so that we can give you more granular feedback on things like performance, all kinds of cool stuff like that. It's a new way to debug your applications, and I highly recommend looking at that. We've also streamlined releases. You're seeing a lot more from us. There's trusted types APIs. We've optimized our build speed and bundle size. We've seen huge reductions there, I think around like 40 to 50% respectively. And there's so much more, right? So that's just in the first half of 2021. That's just prior to V12, not even looking at V12 and beyond. And if you're interested in more about what that debugging looks like, you can go to go.angular.com/angular-devtools to learn more about Angular DevTools and get onboarded to that new debugging experience, which again is running off of all of the benefits of Ivy. If we just look at our most recent wins, which I just added this today because I realized like these wins are great, but like we've done even more in the last like month. So even as early as 2 weeks ago, we have 20% faster builds with ES build. We are now supporting opt-in RxJS 7 with this simple script in the CLI. And we have things like that. Language service has even better autocomplete than before because we're now checking different string literals, number literals, and Boolean and undefined values. There's new APIs and forms. And we're continuing to look at error messages and make sure that we can give you the best granular error messages possible. That's been a huge mission of our team as well, so that the banana in box output is also a clear error message. So if you get banana in box, you know why and where and how to fix it earlier on. From the roadmap, these are more things enabled by Ivy, but we are deprecating and removing support for IE 11, looking forward to fully removing support in a future version, if you're me. ES 2017 support as a default language, improved testing and debugging, advanced guides and topics on our docs, and then optional modules, right? Like I watched a presentation today of like what that might be, and it's super cool. And all of that, again, is built off of the idea that because of all of the legwork we've put into Ivy, we have these other ideas that are super interesting. There's RFCs coming for all of this stuff. And so with that, I just want to say there's never been a better time to NG update, and I can't wait to see what you're building. So thank you so much for being a part of the community. And hi, Tracy.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. I seriously love this talk because I feel like whether it's you or Minko or Mark giving it, there's always like new updates, and y'all have just such a different way to do it. So, and love obviously as part of being a part of the RxJS core team, that the optional RxJS 7, which is totally crazy. Like if you guys haven't seen all that stuff happening, I'm like, oh my God, I literally need like 2 hours to digest all the changes that have happened in 7 already.
I know. Half of what we're doing is enabling what other teams are doing. Like,
which is awesome.
That's the feature.
I love it. Ja, do you want to pull up your slides? Ja's going to go next. For those of you who don't know, Ja is a software engineer here at this dot, also on the Angular core team, doing like really amazing things over there. Main maintainer of zones, and he is like the go-to for zones and everything. So Ja, we'll let you take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. Hello, everyone. My name is Jia, and today I would like to talk about Zone.js by several examples. Okay. So I'm a software engineer of this start, and I have been contribute to Zone.js library for about 4 years. So now I'm the maintainer of Zone.js and also an Angular collaborator. So today I would like to make a brief introduction about what Zone.js is and why you want to use Zone.js. And finally, I would like to introduce how Zone.js is used in Angular. So Zone.js is a library that introduced about, I think, 5 years ago by Grant Ford. And this library is inspired by the Dart language. So basically, Zone.js provides an execution context that persists across asynchronous operations. So this is the feature Zone.js provides. So Zone.js provides an additional execution context and also the lifecycle hooks and error handler for the asynchronous operations. So when we talk about execution context, so this is a concept in JavaScript, and we can, when we run in a function, we have an execution context. So it defines the scope and the variable we can access. And we can access the JavaScript keyword this to access the context information. But just in JavaScript, we don't have an execution context that can be persist across asynchronous operations. So for example, if we have set timeout promise, so when we for example, in the callback of set timeout, when we access this, we will lose all the information when the set timeout is scheduled. So if we want to keep the information across asynchronous operations, we need to define another variable such as that to equal this before the set timeout was scheduled, so we can access the information. So JavaScript doesn't provide automatically execution context persist between the asynchronous operations. So with Zone, so here in this code example, we run a function inside the Zone. So suddenly we have a new execution context. So imagine this new execution context called Zone this. So we have this new context equal to the Zone we are running in. And not only we have this additional execution context in the synchronized function, even in the asynchronous operations such as the callback of set timeout or the then callback of a promise, the context is the same. This asynchronous operation schedule. So we have this Zone this equal to the Zone when the set timeout or promise then is scheduled. So with this Zone.js, we have additional execution context, and this execution context keep the same value in the synchronized or asynchronous operations. So this is the most fundamental feature of Zone.js. So I will use a simple flow to explain what happened inside Zone.js. So this is a JavaScript native set timeout call without Zone.js. So here we have the stack, and the YBPS means the browser or Node.js VM. And this macro task queue is the queue inside the VM. So when we call set timeout, we begin to run this function call in the stack, and we call the native set timeout to the browser, and we schedule a set timeout call in 1 second. And after that, the main stack is cleared, and everything is done. And after 1 second, the browser will send the set timeout callback to the macro task queue. And if there is no other items is pending, and the browser will send the callback to the main stack. So this is how everything works inside JavaScript VM. So if the same thing happened inside the Zone, so we can do some additional steps. So here we have a Zone, and we also have several lifecycle hooks and defined. One is on schedule task, one is on invoke task, and one is on has task. I will explain what those hooks mean by the example. So here we run from the main stack, and we new a zone, and we run a function inside this zone. And because, and here we want to call set timeout. Because we run this set timeout inside the zone, so instead we calling the browser directly. In fact, we are calling a monkey patched version of set timeout, so we can do some additional stuff to intercept and to do some to invoke the hook. So here the first hook is on schedule task. It means some new task is about to schedule inside this zone. So when we call on schedule task, we can do some additional logic here. And after the on schedule task, we then are calling the set timeout, native set timeout of the browser. And because we also have keep the task status inside the zone. So because at the beginning, before the set timeout is called, the zone is stable, so no task is pending in zone. But now we have a new task is about to schedule. So zone has a new task, and so the status of zone is become from stable to unstable. So another hook called onTask will also be called. So inside the zone, we have a state kept inside. There is a macro task count. So at the beginning it's 0, and after the onSchedule task call, it becomes 1. And after that, the set timeout is really finished. And then after 1 second, the browser just push the callback to the macro task queue, and no pending task, so the callback is sent to the stack again. And again, because everything is monkey patched by zone, so instead of calling this callback, the user written callback directly, we call another hook called onInvoke task instead, so we can do some stuff by ourselves. And this onInvoke task is telling the zone that some callback of the task is about to happen. So here, because this onInvoke task is called and the user written callback is invoked, so this task is consumed. So this asynchronous task is finished, and the status of zone become from unstable to stable again. So this onHas task is invoked again, and this macro task count is become from 1 to 0. So now zone is stable. So this is how Zone.js work internally, and how those lifecycle hooks is called. So you can see with these lifecycle hooks, we can monitor and intercept all the lifecycle of the asynchronous operations. And another very useful lifecycle hook is onHandle error. So with this onHandle error hook, we can catch and handle all the error inside the asynchronous operations. So basically, this is all the main features Zone.js provide. So why should we use Zone? So basically, if you want to do something with the synchronous operations, such as test, debug, performance measurement, and if you want to do some auto-rendering resource cleaning inside the framework or trace the user action, you may want to use Zone. So I will use some demo to explain it. The first one is long stack trace. Imagine you have a function like this. We have a main function, and we bound some event listener to a button. And inside of this event listener, we bound another event handler to another button, and we throw error in finally. So if without Zone.js, if you see the stack trace of this error, you will only see the throw error function call, which may be not that useful. But with Zone.js combined everything from the beginning, from the main to the button 1 to button 2. So you can see the logical relationship about why this error happened, who produced this error. So I will demo this one here. Okay. So at first I banned error. So this is the button 1, and we commit this button 2. Oh, sorry, this is not working for me. I forgot to update the you will see a long stack trees and to contain every information from the beginning. It will include information about the main function, the second button function, and the zero error function. So this will be useful to when you debug the application. So I will go back to the slide. So another example is the task tracking. So for example, if you inside your application, inside the button click, you have a lot of asynchronous operations. So in this sample, I just randomly generate a lot of set timeout. So you want to know how many asynchronous operations is generated, how many set timeout callback is invoked and done, and how many callback has errors. You can use a zone to you can run this function inside the zone, so you can monitor all the information, all the status of those synchronous operations. And of course, you can do the performance profiling. So I will show the code here. I will show the count first, the code of the count for here first. So here we have a counting zone we just described in here. So we just define on invoke task callback. So that the font maybe is too small here. So we have an invoke task and on has task here. So we can define some logic to keep the count. And whenever a set timeout callback is called, we just make some calculation of the counter so we can monitor the status here. And we can define, again, we can also define the performance measurement. We can define the performance start and performance end before we invoke the task, so we can calculate the performance of the asynchronous operations correctly. And also we can do the resource auto-releasing by Zone.js. So Zone.js is not only work in the browser, it also works in the Node.js or Electron or any JavaScript environment. So here the code example show a sample with the file system. So so imagine we use FS to open a file, and we got a file descriptor, and we do something asynchronous, some heavy work, and we do something else with the file descriptor at the same time. And we want to release this file descriptor when all of those asynchronous operations is done. So without Zone.js or some library like Zone.js, you have to check whether all those tasks are done or not. And if there is some pending task, you can't you can just close the file descriptor, and you can only close this file descriptor when all the tasks are done. So you have to write a lot of complex logic, and you have to do something. You have to write some logic and do something, and realize that okay, I have to check the status or do something else, which is not a very elegant solution. But with Zone.js, you can just write auto-release file system zone, and in the on-has task, if all the macro task is finished, you can just close this file descriptor very safely. And you don't, because you read everything inside this zone, you don't need to touch the user code. So from the user code perspective, there is no such kind of release logic. You can focus on the business logic, business requirement. And also with all those features combination, the performance measurement and the long stack trees, you can write some more useful features such as user action tracking. So here we have, for example, you have a commercial system, and we have a viewed order button. We have a place order button, and if you want to track what user clicked in the page and how many time cost inside this button click, you can write another zone called performance measurement zone. So I will not explain this code very in details. So basically, you can combine all the features inside this zone to measure the performance and to check what happened, such as a set timeout happened, SML HTTP request is happened. You can get all the information inside this zone, and you can implement a user tracking system very easily with Zone.js. And of course, you can do something like the UI auto rendering, which is the main feature used by the Angular. So if you have some data, and this data can be updated by maybe HTTP request or set timeout or some user actions. So if you want to update this state to the DOM without Zone.js, you have to, for example, with HTTP request, when the data is updated, you have to write something like render the DOM in the callback. And in set timeout, you may have to write render DOM in the callback of set timeout. So you have to run some additional code in every places that the data may be updated. But with Zone, here, in the user code, you don't need to write anything. You just write HTTP request, you just write set timeout, and you just need to provide a zone. And with an onInvoke task hook, and you can do the UI, the DOM rendering in this hook, and you don't need to touch any user code. And so the DOM will be automatically rendering when the data is updated. And of course, Zone.js is not only used in the application, it is also very useful with the test and in the Angular. So if you're using the async, Zone.js provides the async test, it will automatically done when all the asynchronous operations finished. And also, Zone.js provides a fake sync. It will make a synchronized text synchronized. So it will reduce a lot of time and make the asynchronous test not flaky, more stable. So basically, Angular use all those Zone.js features. So Angular use ngZone to tell the Angular framework when to trigger change section when the zone is stable. And also, Angular use the async test, fixed sync test in the component test. And also, Angular use the global error handling mechanism to catch all the errors inside the application. And Angular also use some debug tracing zone to track the status of the asynchronous operations if you want to make better debug experiences. So basically, if you are Angular developer, you will not use the API from Zone.js directly. And you will use ngZone service. And the most useful API is run outside Angular. So if you have some third-party API or some case is not monkey patched by Zone, and you want the code automatically trigger change section, you can use ngZone.run. And in some cases, automatically trigger change detection happen, you can use ngzone.runOutSet Angular. And that's all from me. So if you have any question about Zone.js, you can always ping me in Twitter or post issues in the Angular repo. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I love how I feel like Zone is like that unsung hero sometimes. So it's great to learn more about it and bring more awareness to it so everybody kind of understands what's happening under the hood and how it interacts. So yeah, next up is going to be my talk. So I'm going to go ahead and add myself here. And I'm going to give you guys a quick talk on basically contributing to open source. So this is a question I get a lot. How can I contribute to open source? And I know all of y'all using open source technologies like Angular obviously are like, oh man, how can I be useful? Like, how can I do more? The great thing is that it's just so easy. There's so many ways to contribute, and there's so many opportunities for you out there. Like, for example, the other day, and I just checked to see if my PR was merged or not, and it was. I was so happy about it. But I just made a small little change to the RxJS README because I felt like people really needed to figure out where the RxJS 7/RxJS 8 roadmap is, right? It's kind of like hidden in issues, but I feel like it's really important information. So I submitted a PR, and it was like one line adding a link, but it was merged. So there you go, right? Like, it's not that difficult to contribute to open source and be useful to the community. So this is going to be a really quick starting guide for you all. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter @LadyLeet. I'm always happy to chat. I'm the CEO of a company called This.Labs. I'm on the RxJS core team. I'm a Google developer expert for Angular, Microsoft MVP. If you have heard of the Modern Web podcast, I'm one of the hosts on there as well. And I just love everything community. So I'm always happy to chat. Come find me, come hang out. Back to my day job. So my day job is with This.Labs. We're a team of about 50 developers, 100% remote. I love my team. It's like maybe hard to say that about every team you work with, but I really do love my team. And we also have some amazing clients. So we absolutely love them. And we get to work on such really cool projects. So if you want to come work on like really interesting tech and you're bored at work, or you just want to be surrounded by really smart people and figure out how to get better every single day, I highly recommend you applying. So hit me up on my email, tracy@this.co. We love Angular. We love all the technologies, and it's just a fun place to be. So back to the question, how do I contribute to open source? Well, let me go ahead and share my journey really quickly. We'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about like why you might want to, or how you can. And then I'll talk quickly about like some do's and don'ts as well. So my journey. I started off by going to a boot camp. I met the JavaScript community. I started getting really involved. And again, since I'm a GDE on the RxJS core team and an MVP, it didn't take me that long to get there. I think I was just incredibly passionate, like I know a lot of you are, about community. So the first thing I did was just join the community. I found Twitter. I started talking to people. Like, first thing you can do is like follow all the people who are speaking at this meetup, and come hang out with us, see what we're talking about, and see what other people are doing, right? So I found out who was talking about Angular, speaking at Angular conferences, what was going on. I got to know everybody, and then I just started sharing my experiences. So that's the share and educate part. I started like helping people I could on their journey, anything I could do online on Twitter to help, right? This helped people know that I was interested in the different topics, and I was able to give back in my own way, even as a beginner. And this helped me become a valued member. I also met maintainers. So meeting people and letting them get to know you is really important. So it doesn't have to be at conferences or meetups or anything like that. It can be relationships online. even in the comments, right? Like I can see people that I recognize, like Chandler. So Chandler's doing a great part at just like getting to know the community, hanging out with the community. And you can do that, right? People notice those things. And then you'll be a friendly face, even if it's just, again, online. And the fourth thing I did was contribute. So I always knew I wanted to give back way more. And I was really good friends with the RxJS core team. And I saw that where they needed help, and they needed help with documentation. So I started up a community team, and just, you know, we jump started on the documentation, and it was amazing. It was amazing how quickly we were able to get everything to work together. And, you know, I didn't use any technical skill to be able to organize this. You know, I did like start up a repo and said, hey, okay, let's contribute. But I didn't do like a lot of the heavy lifting when it came to actually writing a lot of the documentation and contributing to a lot of the content. So again, you'd be surprised how much you can actually do and how much is actually valuable based on who you are and what your skills are good at, right? So another thing is, don't expect to become a part of a core team if you start contributing, right? I think, you know, the point here is be helpful, contribute, and hopefully you'll be rewarded. Or, you know, some people are like, I don't know, is like becoming a core team member actually a reward? Like some people would say no, because then you don't have a lot of time in life, right? Work-life balance. So now let's go ahead and talk about the why. So if you say you want to contribute to open source, you definitely have to ask yourself why first. Like, why do you want to do this? Is it functional? Is it aspirational? There's two different ways to approach this, or at least two that I'm going to talk about today. So there's a ton of people that use a particular framework, probably at work, right? You're using Angular, you're using RxJS, you're working on a project, and something is not working within the framework, and you want to fix it, okay? So you obviously have to contribute back to the library potentially for work. So I would consider this a very functional thing, right? You need to fix something that's not working for you, right? Aspirational would be, hey, I just want to build a career in open source. Like I just want to get in there and do things and increase my knowledge within a technology. That I would consider aspirational. So if you're going to do the functional route, right? I would say, again, your life is going to be 10 times easier if you already know contributors or you've like contributed to the repo already, right? So like, for example, Chandler, I see him at a lot of these Angular World Tours. So if he comes and hangs out or says, hey, Tracy, I contributed a fix to RxJS, or hey, there's this bug in RxJS, like, can you help me with it? You know, I'm much more likely, because I know Chandler now just through chatting, to say like, oh yeah, Chandler, of course, I know you. So like, you're not just this random person asking me a favor, like you've like supported the community already, right? Another thing you want to make sure you do is always like submit an issue and ask for feedback before you actually start contributing. So make sure you know, submit an issue, then maybe find a maintainer, and, you know, say, hey, are people working on this, right? So have somebody to champion that issue. Another thing is, you know, again, one of the reasons why to make sure to submit an issue first is because there's so much going on in open source behind closed doors. Like you just don't know. You might not know what is going on. Maybe you really want a feature, and maybe the core team has already talked about it and decided, no, we're not doing this, right? Like maybe you're like, oh, Angular should have like JSX syntax, right? Like that would probably be a pretty big PR that you're going to need to introduce for that to happen. But like the core team has probably talked about it, and maybe they're like, no, that's actually not the right choice. So you don't want to waste a lot of your time contributing to something that like might not be merged, right? That you might not be aware of. The other thing is just to build relationships, right? So find maintainers in other forums. This is number 3. Like if you need a response, GitHub notifications are the worst. I have all of them on mute. There's no way I'd be able to keep up with all of them. It's really noisy, but if you send somebody a personal message, then, you know, they're much more likely to respond to you. So, you know, do that, but definitely don't be impatient. Don't feel like you're entitled to a response. Everyone's busy. You're definitely not their top priority. So, yeah, but again, if Chandler messages me, I'm probably going to say like, oh, Chandler, I always see him at local meetups. Okay, well, like you need some help. Like, let me try to help you, right? The fourth thing is just building genuine relationships, right? Like make sure that you're doing it for the right reason. Nobody likes to like, you know, feel used. So like, you know, Carol, did you say hi just because you're trying to get to know me because you need something in RxJS? Or are you like a genuine human being? Now I'm going to assume you're a genuine human being, of course, right? But nobody likes to be used in relationships. So, and people can feel that. So definitely like make sure you're approaching things from a genuine perspective. This I love, the aspirational aspect of it. I feel like this is kind of why I got into open source. Maybe not because I wanted to build a career, but like more because I just wanted to like hang out and have some fun. So the great thing about this is you can choose, right? You're not like, oh, I'm at work, I'm using Angular, so I have to contribute to Angular because that's the thing I need for work. You're doing it because you just want to. So this is amazing because you can, you know, I think first off, look at different open source projects, look at the issues, whatever, and figure out like, do I like this? Can I be successful in this? Are there any issues I can tackle? Do I like this team, right? It's a lot more flexible in terms of how you want to get involved or what you choose to put your time into. I think the second thing is making sure like you're solving problems that people actually want. So you might think a problem is relevant within a project, but some people might not, right? So, you know, I submitted that small little PR to RxJS README about the roadmap. And, you know, like, was it useful? I mean, I guess they thought it was useful, but how do I know that? It's because I actually asked before I did, right? Even though, again, I'm part of the core team, I was like, hey, I think this is going to be really useful. What do you think? You know, if I had gone and I had been like, well, you know what? I want to add all these learning resources. They might be like, nah, that doesn't belong in the README. It belongs somewhere else, right? So I would have wasted my time. So make sure you're solving problems that maintainers actually want. Another thing and a really easy way to get into open source is just start by the docs. Docs always need help. And if you ask any maintainer, they're going to say, okay, we could use help with the docs. So if you want to become really loved and liked by the community, definitely do that. Also, Ben recently listened to this talk and he was like, you know, do the things that other people don't want to do, right? Like when you're at work, think about the things you might not want to do. Do you love doing code reviews? Do you love writing tests? You know, do you love writing the docs? All those things that feel like work, right, are things that open source projects probably need more of. So lending a hand, looking at the PRs, just doing random code reviews on it, right? Like you don't have to do anything too crazy, but you can do that even right now. You can go to any open source repo and do a code review and they might love it, right? So do that. And then I think the last thing is also just making sure you're educating and sharing your experience, right? Like writing a blog post about, hey, I'm trying to do my first contribution to the Angular repo. Here's the steps to do so. Let me tell you, that would be useful. You know, Deborah speaks at Angular World School of True. I'm sure we've talked about, hey, how useful that would be, like to have a guide on how to contribute to, you know, Angular generally, right? So educate, share, and, you know, that is a great way to be a part of the community without having to do like intense open source contributions that are super technical, right? Like don't let it scare you away. You don't have to be super technical to be incredibly useful within a community. So do's and don'ts. There's a lot of do's and don'ts within open source. Number one is, let's go with the do's first. Like have compassion, right? Maintainers are usually working for free. They're working on nights and weekends. It's taking a time away from their family. So make sure you have compassion. Also treat maintainers like people. Remember that they're just as human as you are. And, you know, like you, like how many tasks can you handle at one time, right? And if you treat them like crap, since they're people, like they're probably not going to pay attention to you. So make sure to do that. Also be professional, right? Open source projects maybe aren't a job you get paid for, but there is some level of like professional etiquette that you should be extending to people that you're meeting in open source and professional. Nobody likes to deal with people who don't respect each other or who are crossing boundaries. Also assume with the best of intentions. Like, don't go into something and be like, wow, this library is crap. It's not written in TypeScript, even though we know that if it's not in TypeScript, it is. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. But like, don't go into a project guns blazing, talking smack, acting like somebody did you wrong or something like that. That is not the way to approach it, right? Like, open source is a tireless and often thankless job. So, just assume that they're trying their best, right? Also, make sure you're abiding by the code of conduct. Treat people as you would like to be treated. Make sure you're abiding by a code of conduct. And if a project doesn't have a code of conduct, then just make sure you're like being nice generally. Definitely don't act or be entitled, right? Don't think you're the biggest priority for a maintainer. They're trying to get their next release out, right? Plus they have a full-time job, plus they have kids, plus they have open source. I mean, it's life, Don't be annoying, like email about an issue maybe that you have or whatever, but like, don't message that person 10 times a day. But follow up, definitely follow up, but follow up within reason. Also, like, don't complain, right? Like, everybody's trying their best again. And sometimes you might not understand a technical decision, but I promise you it was made there for a reason. And a lot of people are going to be like, if you don't like it, go use something else. So yeah, hopefully y'all learned a little bit of something today. I'm always happy to talk about my journey into open source. Always happy to talk about whatever. Hopefully that seems like easy for you, right? Now that you've heard a little bit about what I was able to do, and hopefully that inspires you all to get started in open source. Again, like, documentation is really important. So always contribute to the documentation. Again, we're hiring at this dot, so come and hang out and work with our amazing team. It really is a cool and fun place to work. And you can, again, always email me, Tracy, at this dot. I'm happy to chat. So that is it for my talk. And, thank you all for contributing to the comments. It was nice to see people. I don't know if it's L.E. or Lee Nichols, but thank you for saying yes and being excited about, Emma's talk there. And, myself, Ja, and Emma are all on Twitter, so you can follow us there. But, thank you, Minko, for setting this up for Angular SF. Also, Angular World Tour. If you go to angularworldtour.com and you're not locally in SF and watching this somewhere else and you want us to come to your city, definitely let us know. I know, Ja, we're going to NG Tokyo soon, right? At some point in time, very soon. But you can go to angularworldtour.com and check out like our entire schedule. So thank you, everyone, for listening, and have a really, really great night.
Thank you.